Yeah, it's nice to see you, man. How are you?
Yeah, how you been? Yeah,
I'm good. I'm very good, man.
What's been going on?
Man, not much. I was just noticing you're looking. I like this look, man. It's like the clean shaven with the shaved sides. I spent 5 minutes like messing with I'm very frustrated with my hair right now, and I'm looking at you, and I'm like, this seems like a good idea. Maybe I should just do that.
Well, this is actually fresh today. I've got a photo shoot for new press shots next week. So
nice.
This is the best it ever looks.
You're right.
Basically. So, I like the shaved sides. And also, you can't really see in this light. There's kind of like a really cool sort of white lilac kind of color. Have you bleached your hair before?
I never had. It's a funny thing. You've just touched on like a weird childhood issue of mine, which is like when I was a kid, I always wanted to dye my hair, and I never did. And then by the time I was an adult, like it's kind of seemed like the moment had passed. But there's still a part of me that really kind of just wants to go crazy with it.
Yeah, I don't think the moment's passed. I guess it's like you kind of get set on a look, don't you? And be like, this is what I look like now. Once you break through the crust of that thing, then all of a sudden you're like, oh shit, I can actually do whatever I want, whenever I want. It just tastes it's like a seal. And once you break the seal, you're like, oh yeah, cool. I guess I can just like wear a grill and put in glare lenses and all sorts of shit.
Absolutely. I mean, because part of why we do this, right, is so we don't really have to grow up, right? I mean, that's absolutely a part of it. I feel like people don't talk about enough. It's like we're all clinging to some part of our youth that we just don't want to let go.
Yeah, for sure.
Are you still out in not LA? Why'd I say that? Out in London?
Yeah. Yeah, here for another couple of years, and then they're going to move over to New Zealand is the plan.
No shit.
Yeah, my wife's family is all from New Zealand. And
wow.
We kind of just, I don't know, dubstep's not really that popular in the UK, so I don't get much localized work here. Just the odd show here and there. Most of my work is in the States, but I play New Zealand and Australia a fair bit as well. We've got so much family over there, and like people just keep moving out there that I'm just like, like Alex Perez just moved to Auckland, and I'm just like, really? That would be cool.
I didn't know that. And I mean, it's beautiful out there, obviously.
It's really nice. Yeah, I think it's just like a change of scenery. I've lived in England my entire life. I resisted moving to LA.
Yeah.
Because that's what everyone does. And I was like, no.
Good on you, by the way, because for me, I always push back. And this is like, people get sick of me talking about this, but I always push back on the myth that you have to move to LA. Especially these days. I'm like, you really don't have to.
A real solid core of my identity, musically as Flux Pavilion is British rave. Yeah. Like the project is a rave act where I love rave music, specifically British raves, where it's less about the kind of the production and the lights and the sort of, there's something in America where you're just like, oh my God, everywhere feels like Disneyland sometimes.
Yeah.
It's kind of less about that, more just cramming people in a hot space and playing really loud music and just seeing what happens. There's a feeling in British and across Europe in raves that I guess we've got a little bit more experience with rave music. So it's probably evolved. It's evolved in a different way over here. And there's something about that really helps me understand the music that I write. So staying out here just felt like the right move because it's the dance music that I want to make. And I want to kind of stay close to that feeling. I try to not write American music, but it's hard because it's so fucking fun. And like the whole concept, the way the American people approach dance music is so maximalist. Yeah. And that's like fully what Flux Pavilion is, which is why I think I've done well in America because I respond to the way it works out for you guys. It comes so naturally. So it's kind of like it's been a sticking point for me to be like, no, I need to stay connected to the UK because there's already hundreds of American dubstep artists, right? And there's a fair few British ones, but it's like, that's a thing that I have that makes me come at it from a different way. And I think if this music, especially dubstep, is going to thrive, we need as many people to come at it from as many different directions as possible, because it's got to stay fresh and exciting. And so I kind of like stuck with that mentality of like, okay, it's a thing that I've got that makes me me. So I'm going to try and hold on to that as much as possible.
Yeah. No, man, there's a couple things in what you just said there. The first of which is that it's funny, when I listened back to that first podcast you and I did, one of the things you had mentioned was the frustration with dubstep not being as big in the UK anymore, and kind of feeling like you didn't have a place in your home for what you did. And I don't know why, but that part of that conversation always stuck with me. And I think about it from time to time, because it's got to be an odd thing to navigate. Does it feel any different now than a few years ago? Because I do see there's some interest in like the sort of return to the roots dubstep, like even before your time, like, you know, just like the bass line, like, you know, Benga, like Koki kind of stuff.
All of those guys. And obviously we've got Hamdi now. Hamdi's happened. I just did a back-to-back with him in London, and that was like
great, man. He's crushing. Yeah,
his show was so good, and then to do a back-to-back at the end for like half an hour, it was just like I played all of my new music, and it works just as well. It was really affirming to me to be like, oh, I'm not as far away from British rave music as I thought, because I'm not as experienced in playing in UK raves anymore. So I was like, oh, will my stuff even work? And it worked just as well as I remember, kind of thing. The thing with dubstep in the first place is it didn't transcend rave, but it was born from somewhere else. There was original UK dubstep, which was very much rave music, but like what me and Dr. P and Casper and Rusko and what a bunch of us did is we kind of like went away from the rave scene and just went more towards like Prodigy and Chemical Brothers and being like, oh, this is rave music, but can we take it into other places and make it not just so headsy and it's got to be listened to in the club? Why can't we like expand on it a bit? I don't really know if that's a mentality, but that's the easiest way of putting it across. And that's kind of in the UK, we weren't just playing the clubs. Like I play all sorts of places like skate parks, school gyms, pubs. Like anyone who had a couple of £100 and a sound system would book me, Doc P, Casper, Rusko, and we'd just play our music anywhere. So it's kind of like,
I mean, how fun was that? Because I hear you say that and I imagine it, and that actually sounds very fun to me.
It was a good time. It was definitely a good time, but it was never going to last like that, because it's like it just became dubstep became so popular so quick that it became quite homogenized quite quickly as well. Like what was always great about dubstep was everyone had a completely unique and different sound in the space, and whoever was on top at any given time would be bringing something new to the table. And then after a little while, there became a certain meta where it's like, oh, if you do this particular sound, then you'll be popular, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then I guess that's kind of happened across all like EDM in general, where it becomes more of a sound that lasts a year, and like that's what everyone's doing now, kind of thing. So I think that for me was what was the most exciting time, was that there was no order or no understood idea of what was going to pop off. You'd just be walking along and all of a sudden some 16-year-old from Belgium has just made this fucking mental song and everyone's going off to it, and you're like, wow, okay. And there was no nothing to follow, because the whole thing was so loose and free, I guess, that you wouldn't hear what someone else did and be like, fuck, I need to do that now. You'd just be like, wow, this guy's really cool. Let's have some drinks. And then I'll go back to doing my thing. because like your own sound was more important. I feel like now in dubstep especially, it's kind of like you've got to follow the meta and be in line with roughly what's going on. Otherwise you kind of get left behind, which is not strictly true. It's not strictly how things have to work. And I think when you say about me and how it feels to like be not as consumed in the UK, I think it bothered me for a while. And then I realized that I'm not doing anything about it. Like, how can I expect the UK to fall in love with dubstep again if there's not as many people as possible who also love dubstep writing it?
Right.
Like, if the only people writing dubstep are people that want to play at Lost Lands, then that's where the genre is going to thrive, and it's great. But that's kind of where it's going to live. Where if there's people that want dubstep to thrive in the UK dance music scene, in the raves or across Europe, and if that's the focus, then that's the music that's going to get written. And I kind of, that's one of the things that's dragged me back into dancefloor music, where I'm just like, it's pretty shitty to just sit around and think, oh, why is it not like this anymore? Because I'm one of the few people alive that could change that. Because I'm really good at writing dubstep, and I have a vision of what I think it should be. So yeah, rather than sitting and trying to think about where it went wrong, I'll be like, right, well, what do I want it to be? And that's the music I'm writing.
Yeah, I mean, is that that's a very sort of great pivot, I think, to the new EP here. When you were writing it, I guess my question is, were you already thinking like this, or was it kind of just you were in the studio, this music started falling out of you, and you sort of realized through the creative process what you're actually doing, you know?
Yeah, I guess it's more with this EP specifically, it's realizing through the creative process. But now I've realized, so everything, I was kind of put the EP out and I love it, but it's not as dance floor as any of the new stuff I'm writing. So it's like a step between .wav and what I'm now writing, which I think what I'm now writing will be a step between Fluxiverse and what I'm writing now. Like, that's how it always works. But I've got quite a lot more, even crazier. Like, I've done loads of quarter note stuff, but I'm trying to do like quarter note with melodies, which isn't revolutionary, but I'm just kind of like, I don't hear that enough. Yeah. And trying to fill in some gaps here and there. So yeah, that I was still very much in .wav brain space at the start of this. I'd done a few dance floor things, but I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do next. And then this EP, the writing of this EP was me rediscovering how much I like massive build-ups and that big release of tension. Yeah. And I'm like, I really missed this, especially in my live show. I did the .wav live show for about a year and a half, and it was really good, but I just didn't feel like the crowd was leaving there with a sense of completion. It kind of felt like there was tension the entire night, and then everyone went home and be like, oh, that was good, but I don't feel complete. I don't feel like it's been completed. Like, there needs to be more of a build up and an explosion. So that was kind of where a lot of this music came from. It's like, I need more of stuff like this in my sets. And then as the time's gone on, I'm like, just removing .wav in its entirety from the whole of my show. And I mean,
that moment of tension and release, man, I do think, not to just blow smoke up your ass, but I mean, I think you are one of the experts at that. I mean, just one of the best. Like, when you were talking just now, I was thinking about some of your anthems that still get played, you know, these timeless anthems, I Can't Stop and all that. And I mean, I've seen countless DJs drop that song in a million different scenarios, countries, times a day, all that. And the reaction is the same every single time. And it's always a notch above whatever was happening before that. You know, I think there's something to, like, obviously it's an anthem and people know it, but I think even beyond that, there's something in you that I think can do that kind of like no other. And I don't really know what that is, but I'm glad you're looking into it.
Yeah, well, yeah, like that is the thing. Like I spent a lot of time listening to my bangers, that kind of year of anthems that I had, and being like, oh, I'm going to try and replicate this. And I kind of have done quite well, like with the Thief remix and Emotional, International Anthem. All those tracks are just like me trying to redo the formula. But the process of writing .wav, as soon as I took, because .wav was entirely analog, it was all drum machines and synthesizers, and so I didn't really have. I was using a completely different set of tools, and kind of through that writing process, I really hit into the process of just feeling your way through it. It's if it feels right. It's the way I've always kind of talked about my music, that it's not really about what it sounds like, it's how it feels. But diverting completely from my sound enabled me to really explore that process of being like, I need to use something other than my ears here to be led by that kind of feeling, that I'm trying to have my music kind of come across. And that it kind of translates as closing my eyes and listening to the song and waiting. It's like meditation, but it's not really meditation, because you're not trying to think of nothing. I'm trying to just specifically not think, but feel.
Yeah.
And I'll just listen to the song, and then I'll get a feeling and be like, oh no, the build up needs to do this, or like that. There needs to be a drum edit there. And I think it's a thing that a lot of people do. It's a way of where you kind of like do stuff with intention, but draw from your intuition. But I work like that. Nearly 90% of all my decisions made are gut reactions. And just like, if a track drops and I'm not clenching my hands or just like wanting to get up out of the chair, it's not right. And I keep going and going until I squeeze the energy, and it's just squeezed and tightened up even more, just to get that point where it's not quite chaotic enough, but it's not. It's like, for me, there's a balance between fatigue and intensity.
Right.
Most of my off-cut songs that aren't ready are fatiguing. You're just like, oh my God, this is tiring to listen to, because there's too much going on. Whereas if I tighten it up enough, it just has this intensity that I think you can only capture by dialing in that feeling. Yeah, this is the process of me still working out what the fuck it is that I
of course
specifically do. But I get it too. And the more I listen to my music, I'm working on my dance floor music, I'm just like, okay, I know my thing. I know what my thing feels like. But I've been doing loads of collabs. I've got a track with Willy, one with Zed's Dead, one with Excision that I've just finished in the past few weeks.
Nice.
And all of the conversations have been the same. I've had to do the mix down on all of them, because I'm like, no, something's not right. And they're like, what? I was like, I don't know. Can't tell you, but it's not right. And it can't go out until I've worked on it. Yeah. Because I need to just balance some things and get it feeling right. And
it's like that, that old cliche about the definition of pornography. It's like, I'll know it when I see it,
Yeah, for sure.
But let me throw this at you too, because I think this is another part of, at least for me, what makes your sound stand out and feel unique, is that so much of modern dubstep, the meta, if we use that term, like, it's this aggression, it's like, let's rage, it's like this anger thing, and that's not really what I get from your music, despite the fact that it is very intense and you can rage to it and go crazy and headbang or whatever you want to do. But to me, there's always a sense of, I don't know if it's like fun or wonder or
fun. Yeah, you hit it on the head. That's exactly it. It's like, sometimes I think that a memo got, it's like the word rave made it from England over to America, and someone on the East Coast was like, rage? Rage? Because it's like,
some Boston guy is like, oh, rage? I got lots of that. Yeah.
So I think that's a quintessential difference between, especially with dubstep, how the two nations approach it. Like, we don't really talk about kind of anger and aggression and just rage and all that power. For us, it's like, it's fun, party, crazy music where you're just like, oh my God. And you just get this sense of abandon, which obviously does exist in America too. But it's kind of like, there seems to be a core difference in how the music is approached, just in terms of the bass feeling. And I think for us, it tends to be more about fun.
Yeah.
Hence Rusko.
And 100%. Yeah. In America, it became like a whole new generation's like heavy metal, which it's cool in its own way, but I'm the same as you. Like, I started going to raves in the late 90s in the Midwest US. And I mean, it was not the big top circus it is now. It was very much what we're talking about: dark rooms, warehouses, improvised spaces, no trimmings. And so for me, that's always what I connected with too. And I was always obsessed with UK music. I mean, like old UK hardcore and happy hardcore was like the first dance music I ever really fell in love with. And so I think that's part of what I connect with what you're doing too. Because I really do, now that we're talking, I'm like, right, yeah, that UK spirit really does shine through in a way.
But then there's something to be said about it's like the consciousness of the music of dubstep in the US is that kind of like super powerful rage mosh pit thing. But all of the trimmings are really fun, which is one thing where you get British people like, oh, fucking bloody Americans and their rave music. And I'm like, guys, it's like more ravey than it is here. You go to fucking EDC and I'm like, this is absolute like fantasy. And like Lost Lands, you're just like, there's a sense of abandon here that makes this just super fun and fantastic. But it's not as present in the music itself. I think the approach to rave in America feels really bang on to me, but there's a through line in the music, especially in dubstep, where I'm like, it's kind of been a side note. The fun is more of like a social media side note where like, oh, this will be funny for socials. And I'm like, no, I kind of want the music to just be fun in general, where there's like, I don't know, I'd always, in this particular thought process, I think of Bass Cannon and how it has a kalimba xylophone intro and then a massive cowbell over the entire drop. And it was like that. I feel like if Dylan Francis would have done that, he would have made a big joke about the cowbell thing.
Right.
Whereas for me, it's like, I still thought it was pretty cool. Like, it's pretty obviously fun and silly to have cowbell over a dance floor drop, but I was like, nah, this is sick though. Like, just because
and it is
fun,
sick. You're right. I mean,
just because it's fun and maybe a bit silly and off the wall doesn't mean it has to be a joke, because like you can have stuff that's a little bit disconnected from seriousness and the reality, the drudgery of life, which is also like full of really serious intent. Like Frank Zappa is always the idol for me in that respect. Like incredibly serious, professional, talented musician, but also just like would have fart noises in his songs because he's like, I don't know, I just think a fart noise would work really well here in the middle of this epic 8-minute solo. And I always look at that and be like, oh shit, he took not taking himself seriously really seriously. And I think I hold on to that. And that's kind of the Circus Records spirit. That was
it's in the name, right?
Yeah, that's always what we were going for, is to like write good shit, but also write stuff that people just go, I didn't know you could do this.
Man, there's this DJ out of Toronto. Her name's Bambi, and she's amazing. She does like a lot of Caribbean influence stuff and jungle and footwork. And she had this one quote I always think about, which is that I'm going to mangle it, but it was basically saying that like being silly is actually a political act. And like DJs and musicians who include silliness in what they do should be taken as seriously as the most heartfelt songwriter, especially for something like rave music, kind of for the reasons you were just describing, that life is hard and the world is on fire and people need a space to just be free and crazy and wild and let that go. And if you're someone who can provide that space through whatever fun, silliness, allowing people to feel able to like be out there and free and all that. I mean, her point basically was like, that's just as important as any of the other benefits from music. And I think about that all the time, man. Yeah.
Yeah. Like Flux Pavilion is it always kind of represented the other guys, right? You've got your main stage guys, and then you've got the kind of weird nerds that don't really fit in there, but also have loads of ideas and want to have fun. Like the kids in the library, that's kind of why I always looked at Flux. It blew up bigger than I ever really thought. So all of a sudden we ended up on the main stage. And I was with all the Tiestos and stuff. And I'm like, oh, I really don't belong here, because really the space that I want to cultivate is just an all are welcome and all is acceptable kind of attitude to the crowd and the personality, and just how you want to approach the music. Like there's no meta or niche or like, this is my thing. It kind of is harmed me in a sense because it's so broad, and I haven't managed to like create a very specific sellable brand product. But I think the brand is that if you are bored of what's going on and everything feels the same, come hang out and come to my show.
Of course. Well, and it's always a balance too, right? Because if you went too far the other side of creating a sellable branded product, through that process, it almost unavoidably, it's going to take something away from this fun spirit, unique feel that we're talking about. And I mean, I'm the same as you, man. So I guess we're just preaching to the choir here. But to me, it's like going for the weird choice and the unique choice to me is like, that's always the right move. Like, it's not even a question.
Yeah, it's like I look at what other people are doing and I think, okay, cool, that's done now. I can't do that then. So right. What have I seen no one else doing? Like I've been talking about me and Dr. P. I really want to do a full choreographed dance video of just me and P. We like hire as a choreographer and then we train for
that would be
weeks
good.
and weeks, and then just make a dubstep record and then have just me and Sean. Like I'm not talking about a troupe, but I'm talking about me and Sean just dancing, just these kind of like odd looking guys.
That would be so good, dude.
Doing a really good dance. Yeah. We're talking about it. We're working on it. But yeah, things like that. I'm like, oh, haven't seen anything like that before, and that I get a massive kick out of, because it's like the idea of doing something that no one else has done, like uncharted ground, is what helps me get up in the morning for sure.
Man, I mean, so to talk a little bit more about the Fluxiverse EP, sort of on this note, you've got that track on there with Conrank, and I hope you take this as the compliment I mean it as. But when I first heard that song, I like busted out laughing, like happy, joyous laughing when the drop came. Because to me, it was kind of like, I've thought about that track a few times just because it's such a crazy thing to do and put out. I don't know if you agree, but I almost think of that track as like the inverse of Bass Cannon, where the build up and the breaks in that track with Conrank are so aggressive and ravey and wild. And then the drop, it like sucks everything out. And it's just these little micro sounds. And it's kind of, I don't know, it's flipping that like minimal maximal idea. Anyway, I just love that track, man. It's like I'd never heard anything like that.
Yeah, I think there is stuff like a kind of like Peekaboo and sort of the G-Rex Peekaboo verse kind of thing. I've always really loved that sound, and just like the super, like just going to like absolute minimal. I accept the praise. I love the song, but I feel like it's actually just my take on something that those guys have been cultivating for years and years. So I don't feel like I can take any credit for the concept of going down to this like really small, but I think there's something in that sound of like the energy is implied. You do have to have the crowd on your side, Otherwise, it falls completely flat. But if you do have the crowd on your side and they're ready for it, you take everything away from them. And the only way to respond to that is to fill the space with your own energy, where you're just
That's
like, holy shit, this is. And I think, that track when it hits, I'm still trying to find the best place in my set for it. I think once I can find the perfect moment, but when I do get it to hit, it just has that. It's like such a magical. It's like bigger than any other track that I've made in a way.
Well, and that's the thing too. Just note for any like up and coming artists listening is that it's such a smart thing to just think about. Okay, what's happening most of the time at a show where this song would be played? And it's like, okay, it's probably a dubstep show, massive drops. If you're in America, people headbanging, waiting for the next one. So how do we break up that energy? How do you disrupt that? How do you make what you do stand out? It's like, oh, well, just, let's put the front in the back and the back in the front. Like it's not like a complicated idea, but it's such a smart thing to think about of like, how does this actually fit in with the larger picture?
I think to me, again, it feels like a very British approach of like stripping back and going for the minimal and getting the crowd to go, ooh, just because it's like that space and ripping everything away. Like that's a really British thing. Whereas, like we say with the American, tend to go for maximalist, where you just like ram it, the loudest, sound like Space Laces, where it's the loudest, the best produced thing you've ever heard. And that it does elicit the same reaction, but I don't have the patience to learn how to produce like that. It's not really been my thing. Completely modern production techniques. I've found personally that the more I've dedicated to learning about production, the less I listen to the feeling that I was talking about earlier. The less I go by my guts, because I'm going more specifically about the science. So I kind of like, as a rule, I try not to do that super loud thing, because I can't do it as well as anyone else. As your Excisions and your Space Laces and your Sudden Deaths, they're like so fucking good at doing that. I'm like, it would take a lot. I'd have to restructure my entire process to be able to do it like those guys do. Whereas in my process, there's space to do things like where you're at, where it's like, as long as it feels right. I spent quite a long time working on that build up and just getting it so that when it all cuts out, it just has that perfect feeling. And it's one of those things that, I think about my manager a lot in those moments, because anytime I play him a song for the first time, if it's working, it'll be like, yeah, on to the next one. Just because you just know, he just knows, same as me. You just hear it and you're like, yeah, that works.
Dude, that's valuable just to find someone you're that in sync with. You know what I mean? Because even that is rare.
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of all of us, to be honest. Like the whole circus thing has always been led by the feelings of just like trying not to overthink what stuff sounds like, what genre it is, where does it fit. It's just like, if you can listen to it and it comes in any bit, the vocal or the drop or just the drums or something, and you go, yeah, this is quality. That's what you're looking for. And then kind of, if you do enough stuff that feels like that, the world will more than likely adapt to make space for that music, because it's like that's what kind of happened with dubstep in the first place. Like enough really good quality dubstep was being written that the world just kind of found a bit of space. It was like, okay, we're going to shift some stuff over and that's going to fit there. And then it just expanded, because there's no way you can deny that dubstep was just really good. It just had, it's not, let's forget about what it is now and what it is then, but the fact that it went from like it didn't exist to it existing, I feel like the world adopted it because it was just really fucking good. More than because it had this specific sound or it went viral or anything like that. It just, you can't listen to the Scream, Benga, Casper, Rusko, Koki, Mala, any of that stuff without being like, yeah, Yeah, this is banging.
It's undeniable, man. That's
that's the right word.
I don't know if you know the comedian Jim Gaffigan, but that's sort of his famous piece of advice that he would always give to younger comedians was just, they'd be like, how do you make it? What's the secret? And he would just always say, you just be undeniable. That's the only way to do it. Because, it's the same with any cultural thing. We're all resistant to change. Like, I think that's a human quality. Everyone on some level fears change or fears having to, mess up what they've already got working, that kind of thing. Even something as simple as like learning a new genre of music and listening to it can be hard until you do it. And then it's the best feeling of all time, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just a constant dragging people across the finish line. And then eventually they're happy that you brought them there.
Yeah, it was I was talking to my brother. My brother has never really been that interested in what I do. He likes it, but it's not really his thing. He listens to like King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard and he's got an impeccable taste in music, but hasn't really been into the dubstep thing much. But just the past couple of years, he's been getting more and more into it. And he was like, what do you do? There's so many choices. What road do you go down? Do you go like AT-aliens and then Cyclops and Subtronics and then Excision and Sudden Death? And then you got Hamdi or your sound, and just there's like all these different lanes of like what's popular. I know a lot of what I said is all in one lane. You can tell what I'm mainly focusing on at the moment. But yeah, there's like loads of different variations on it, and it's like I kind of had to explain to him. I was like, you can never ask yourself that, because as soon as you see a lane that someone else is in and that someone else is driving, you don't have an opportunity to drive that lane anymore. It's better to start your own, or at least find a niche, I suppose, and be like, no one's doing this. The key is you have to love that thing.
Yeah.
So you can't just go, no one's doing this, I'm going to do it. Because unless you love that thing that you're trying to cultivate, you'll run out of steam, I think.
You'll run out of steam, and you'll just be pissed off, because I think sometimes you find a niche that nobody's doing that you really genuinely love, but maybe it either doesn't take off or it takes a very long time to get there. And for all that time, you still got to like it, Yeah. And if you don't like it, then you'll quit very, very easily. Yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of like finding a niche. But then it's kind of hard for new artists, especially, because sometimes what you want to do is what Sudden Death is doing.
Right.
So like, the whole, find your own thing sometimes doesn't really work, because like sometimes as an artist, you're just like, I just want to do that guy's thing.
Well, when you're starting off, I mean, we all start off wanting to be our favorite artist that we look up to, right? So of course, I think that's natural. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but you can't stay in that mode for too long.
Yeah, or just as a career. There's so much stuff that's like, there's career advice and creative advice. Like they're very different pools. I had an argument with someone on Twitter not long ago about, basically the argument doesn't really matter. It's they weren't understanding my point. I was talking about it was about exploitation of art. And I was trying to make the point of, if you have a talent or you have an intuition to create art, you are exploiting that talent. You have a skill and you exploit that skill, or you exploit's not quite the right word, but you utilize that skill to make the art. And then what he was arguing about is like, we shouldn't exploit the art to make money. And I'm like, well, they're actually two completely different things.
Yeah.
You can utilize and exploit your own thoughts and talents to create the art, but that it can end there. The mentality of how to build a brand and how to do stuff can end there. You don't necessarily have to then take that art and exploit it to make money.
Right.
And I guess my point is those two things are separate. A lot of people they go in the studio and they go, I need to make art, and then that art needs to make money. And they connect it all into one experience, which becomes quite convoluted and is just kind of bullshit. to work in that space, because you're about to write some notes on your song, and you're thinking about how it's going to make some money. Like, it doesn't have to work like that. You can work on your art truly as a pure expression of who you are and what you do. And then once you leave the studio, take that art, go home and work out how to make money from it.
Right.
It's like the art can be pure and make money. You just have to work out how to cut that line in the middle where you can, when I'm in the studio, I'm Josh, I'm not even Flux Pavilion. So it's not like, fuck, Flux needs to do this, needs to do that. I'm a guy who loves writing music, so I write whatever I want to write. And then I go home and go, if I just change these few bits, like the businessman comes in and start going, oh, if I just do that. But they have to be two different characters. And I think that's something that I've started realizing more recently, that it's the way that I've been approaching it for a long time. And I think a lot of people can get really disheartened in the studio because their head is already in the end product. Like, how do I make a living off of this? And it's like, you're kind of denying yourself the fun part, for one, but then also the ability to probably make something that does make a bunch of money, because the stuff that makes money is stuff that's real. And if your head is always in the game of how am I going to sell this, it's probably not going to be real. It's going to be a slightly weird, mishmash, convoluted kind of like trying to get yourself into a thing that other people might also like. Yeah. Where I think it's way easier to just make the thing and then sit there and ponder on how to sell it.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, make the how to sell it somebody else's problem. Make something so crazy that somebody else is complaining, how am I going to sell this? You know, like that's because eventually somebody will figure out how to sell it, and then you'll have the new thing, and that's what everyone will want, you know?
That's kind of what I do with my label now. My relationship with the label is more just like, I'll give you the music, you sell it.
Yeah.
So don't really tell me how to change my music, and I won't tell you how to sell it. Like, I won't be like, oh guys, no, we need to do this on Instagram, or we need to do this. It's like, whatever. You guys are doing your job. I'm doing mine though. Yeah. And both of those sides must remain quite pure. Which sometimes though, if my label end up doing some kind of campaign that I think is cheesy or lame, them's the breaks. That's them doing their job, and that's what they think is the right thing to do. Like, it's unfair for me to go in and be like, no, you must change this for my ego.
Right.
When in the same breath, I'm like, you can't tell me anything about my music for my ego. Like, you can't have them both.
Yeah.
Is after 15 years of doing it, that's what I've come to understand, that it's like everyone has their place. And yeah, the business side, it can be completely separate from the creative side if you let it, basically.
Yeah, man. I mean, you're encapsulating a lot of thoughts I've had very concisely here. I mean, I keep thinking about, you know, we're talking about this sort of the division of creative and business, and we're talking about sort of the old era versus the new era, like the rave roots versus sort of the modern meta of whatever's happening in bass music. And there's not to bring everything back to the new EP, but again, a collab you did on there with Link. Well, yeah, you worked with Link, who's like one of my closest friends. I love Jamie, and that I love that song, The Ones You Loved on there. And I look at him and I look at you, and that's two generations of UK rave music. And I know, talking to him, that he's become interested in going back to his rave roots recently. I mean, that's sort of his whole Link project.
He did the thing. He moved to LA, and I remember telling him when I was just like, dude, don't do it. Don't move to LA. Stay here. Purely for that reason of like your roots. It's like, I think it's not a great idea to move into a space that's completely alien creatively, I suppose, until you know who you are. And that's talking specifically like from our perspective, of like we're rave artists. And then if I was to then just like, now I feel like I could live anywhere because I know who I am, I know what I do, and I can just do that. But when I was 21, I would have got lost in loads of other people's ways of doing things. And I think I would have found it a lot harder to really cement my voice and who I am, because you're just kind of lost in a sea of loads of other shit going on.
Yeah.
I remember when he was moving out there, I was just like, stick to your thing. But Link exists, and like from all the other stuff, obviously with Lax, kind of like Lax and then 3 Bar and then Link, everything is him. It encapsulates him and his like production techniques, but also his rave sensibilities.
Yeah.
So he did the move to LA, and he didn't really lose who he was. He may feel like he did at times, but his output says otherwise. And Link for me is the most excited I've been of any of his projects, because it's just so fucking good. Like, I've currently got 3 Link tracks in my set, and I'm just like, man, I don't know if I can do like a Link tribute period of my set, but I'm
You're
like,
just a cover band now. Yeah.
If he's putting out new songs, I'm like, oh fuck, I got to play this one as well.
Yeah, he's so good. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, he is really good. So that was super exciting to work with him. And it was like one of the last ones. I was in LA working with Terra Jr., and he just sent me over some parts, and I worked on it that evening. And the next morning, I took it in with Terra Jr. and we wrote the song. And then we had it all wrapped up within 2 or 3 weeks. Basically, it was like the EP had to be finished, and then that track was like last one over the line, where it's just like, oh, this has just come together. And I'm really happy that it did.
Yeah, no, of course, man. And his, talking about sort of production values of the youth too. I mean, him, there's a few people, like you mentioned Space Laces and Sudden Death. And I think of them. I think of Link. I think of someone like Tisoki. I mean, there's maybe like, I don't know, 5 to 10 people I could name as far as like, I don't know who's the best, but no one's better than them, you know?
Yeah. I know what you mean. Just kind of embracing the new technology, I suppose. I think that's what it is for me. That's kind of why I moved away from .wav as a core Flux Pavilion thing. Like got some plans to probably turn .wav into a side project, so that I can keep working on that music, but it's not really core Flux Pavilion, because like Flux is about keeping moving and exploring new processes. And that album took me to exploring the processes of the 70s and 80s, which was really fun as a synth lover. But it's like, it eventually, as I was wanting to write more dancehall music, it felt quite stifling to be stuck with not really, like, now since I produce all my own, like build all my own drums from synthesizers and start understanding like transients more and a whole bunch of stuff that I get from these guys, like listening to these guys and being like, okay, so how the fuck does Link have such a loud, perfect kick?
Yeah.
And I was like, and so going out and working that stuff out, I think that is kind of a core part of Flux Pavilion that I didn't give any attention to when I was writing .wav, is staying up to date and not necessarily ahead of the curve, but staying abreast of what people are doing with modern tech enables me to still potentially make sounds that no one's ever heard before. And that's always the idea. That's what I love about electronic music, is you can potentially just make a noise on your laptop that no human has ever heard anything quite like that before. And I think that's really fun. And it's always, the new breed that are discovering new ways of doing that. And staying plugged into that is pretty much where the new EP came from. It's like this EP is me plugging back into that, and then now I'm probably going to do a Fluxiverse Volume 2, which will be me having been plugged in, and then it keeps on moving from there.
I love it, man. Have you been on the road a fair amount too?
Yes and no. Like the amount that I could expect to be post-COVID, but COVID is still suffering. I think specifically in dance music terms that it's suffering, because that's the world I live in, but the whole world is suffering. Everyone's broke and we're all struggling. So it's like, the world coming back into it is not like it was before COVID, but that I don't think is remotely unique to music. I think everyone
No, of course. Yeah. I mean,
like
we feel it because it's our lives. But yeah, I mean, of course, the whole pandemic time, just like the class inequality went insane. And yeah, of course. Yeah. It's hard
like
for everybody for a lot of reasons. But yeah,
you can't just make a vaccine and click your fingers and then be like, oh, we're back to normal now. It's like, no, the cracks that were there pre-COVID that were dragged wide open during COVID are still very much there. So it's like we're touring and doing stuff, not quite to the same level, like not to the same quantity. The shows have all been really, really good, but it's like it's been a while since I've gone off and done a 40-date tour.
Would you want to? Do you still like doing that?
So with .wab, I developed this whole show with the guitar. And so next year I'm going back to DJing, purely with what I'm talking about, with keeping moving. And my show, the whole laptop show, is good, but because it's all like time-coded visuals and stuff, if I want to put a new song in, it's actually a remarkable amount of work to get some new songs in there. And I want to be able to just be working on new stuff and keep trying it out and hearing new songs and kind of get back into that mentality, with the idea that then once I go on if I do a big bus tour or something, you don't really change the show that much through that tour. So that's when I'll start bringing out the instruments and do my like full live experience thing. So so I'm kind of parking the live exploration to the side with the idea that once I do a much more meaty tour. So for me, I would do that tour because I really love the playing guitar and all the live kind of aspect of it. What's annoying about it is if I'm only playing shows every couple of months, so much has happened in my time off that I've been having to rebuild the entire show every single time. And it's like with a DJ set, that's a fair bit easier.
Yeah. That's
true. I'd quite like to do a big tour where I could do like a 90-minute, even 2-hour set that of just like a much more expansive thing, because that's what the live show kind of is. It's more expansive than a DJ set because I have the ability to improvise basically and make it new every single night. And that's super fun. I'd like to do a bigger tour with more interesting production like that.
I mean, it's fun I've seen you up there with the guitar and the face paint and all that, man. I mean, it's a very fun, we keep coming back to this idea of fun, but it is a very fun show to see. And I wanted to ask you, this is a little off the track we were just on, but I was curious because I don't think we talked about it last time. Like, what's you've talked about being a nerdy kid and being in your basement with synthesizers and all that, but what's the like fantasy influence for you? Where does that with like the face paint and the fantasy worlds, like, is this coming from like a Bowie place or is this like a D&D place? Like, what's the nerd influence?
So it is me. I love fantasy stuff. So I like growing up, me and my brother used to play with Warhammer and Magic the Gathering and stuff like that. And I kind of like went through my 20s being Flux Pavilion. And then at the end of my 20s, I got back into me and my brother got back into Warhammer and Magic the Gathering. And we were like, oh shit, we had this wrapped up when we were like 12. We knew who we were. So, and then since then I've started reading nothing but fantasy books and playing D&D and stuff like that. So,
dude, let's go. Like, I had, sorry, not to cut you out, the exact same thing. I played D&D like crazy when I was 12, nothing until my mid 30s. And now it's like I'm on a professional sports team. Like we go every week. We have a serious game. I don't miss it. I fly back at 6 a.m. for it. It's so, I don't know, man. You're right. We had it all figured out already.
So it's less of a Bowie-esque concept of like, oh, this is how I must deliver my art. It's more like, this is how I am expressive. My talent as a human that I've put to work as Flux Pavilion is having an imagination, basically. Some of us are really good at seeing the world for what it is, and some of us are really good at seeing the world for what it could be. And you can't have a good operating world without both of those things. And I'm very much head in the clouds always imagining things, and like fantasy just speaks to me because it's like people have invented worlds, ecosystems, and like magic systems and all sorts of stuff. It's like that just really, it tickles something inside of me that nothing else can. So it feels only natural that I drag a bunch of that stuff into Flux, because then it helps me to get excited and kind of come up with ideas and stuff as well. Like, I was working on a song and didn't really know what some decisions to make, and then just kind of imagined that the song was primarily using square waves, and the kind of idea with Flux Pavilion is that you got these I don't know if you can see the tattoo.
Yeah.
Got the 4 fundamental waveforms of the universe:
Nice.
sine, square, triangle, sawtooth, and they're like these 4 waves are emanating from different places in the universe. And Flux Pavilion is a interdimensional space wizard who's gone and plugged into all 4 and uses this power to create magic, and that magic is his music. So like the music is his talisman, and he makes people feel things with his magic effectively.
Yeah,
that's kind of like the short version. But then all these planets, there's like Takarin is the name of the one where the square wave is emanating from, and it's a water-based planet. And I've just like been devising a bunch of ecosystem stuff and flora and fauna and like what it's like to be there, because then it helps us evolve the visuals and things like that. And then I was working on this song and be like, oh, what now? Let me close my eyes and imagine this planet, and then I'll let that inform what the feeling of this song is meant to be. And it's the thing that no one else will ever plug into, because it's like it's not really for them. But for me, it's just a really great way of expanding my imagination and giving myself feelings and direction when there isn't, I don't really know where it's going. When I need to ask myself a question, I go to fantasy, and I'm like, well, what's the most fun choice here in terms of world building and stuff like that. And I'm going to dive into it a bit more. I'd quite like to sell it a bit better so that people know that Flux Pavilion is a interdimensional wizard.
It's worth getting out there. Yeah.
Yeah, it is a thing. But then with .wav and Fluxiverse, it's all in there. And I think at some point I'll work out a way of making it more palatable. But at the moment it's a process of me it's how I can understand creativity is by looking at it from a purely fantastical point of view. I do have some reservations and fears with that it does remove me from the real world a little bit more. I do want to create a space where people can leave the real world and just be like, oh, we're living in this other universe. But I was talking to Anna Managuchi, their first album, Endless Fantasy, and then their second album, USA, is like quite a big departure. And Pete was talking about it. He was like, well, yeah, Endless Fantasy, we were just living in a fantasy. We weren't looking at the world for what it is and all the problems and stuff. We're just like, you're like, yeah, we're in a fantasy, everything's fine. And I do feel like I'm in that. That's kind of what I'm building. But it's like, that's fine. We can't, not everything can be real and gritty. Yeah. And like, maybe I can just build this completely positive fantasy space that people can go to for a couple of hours on a weekend kind of thing.
I don't see anything wrong with that. I mean, I get what they're saying as well, because certainly, and this maybe gets into a bigger discussion of like raver culture and all that. I think there is maybe a tendency to like just shove your head in the sand in this kind of world, because you could live in this world 24/7 and really not pay attention to the very serious, very important things happening and kind of just run away from it all. And some people do that, for decades, and that's not good. That's not healthy. But I think with approaching it with the awareness that's like, no, this is fun. We're playing together, and then exactly. We'll go back to our lives, and then we'll come back here later. I think that's a very healthy way to do it. Yeah,
I guess that's why I bring up the addendum, to be like, oh, by the way, I know the world is shit.
Yeah.
But because it's like, like you say, it's important to knowingly accept the fantasy distraction. It's unhealthy to just like be distracted all the time and not know you're being distracted. But like, I don't know, there's this whole kind of like stigma attached to distraction where if I was to be playing computer games, I'm like, yeah, you know, it just kind of distracts me. People be like, no, that's bad. You shouldn't be distracted. I'm like, what the fuck? Why not? Like, as long as you do it knowingly, like, let me have a fucking break, please.
Of course.
Like,
well, and so much, I mean, so much of the chaos in the world, it's not, some of it is stuff that we can affect and we can, you know, be active and we can help each other and that sort of thing. But there are the sort of larger existential things. It's not something that you as an individual, it's like, if you stop playing that video game, you could go fix world hunger. It's like, it doesn't really work that way, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And it's like,
everybody needs the release valve. Everybody needs their little break. And then we kind of get back into it, you know?
Yeah, it's like there's the understanding that you are getting into it at some points. It's like if you're trying to avoid reality at all times, then yeah, that's not really a very functional way to live. But yeah, that escape into fantasy and because all of that stuff does leak into reality too. Like for me, I'm about to start playing more with how I dress and makeup. I've got like a cape and all sorts. So just kind of like playing about with it, with the wizard thing a little bit more. And a lot of that is as soon as I'm making these choices, I'm wearing more clothes in my day-to-day life that are more out there, reminded me of when I was a teenager and I just did whatever I wanted. And I'm just like, oh yeah, the power that I give myself by indulging in these fantasies also does change my reality. And it's like, if you are allowing yourself to be that person, that it might be a fantasy version of you, but you allow yourself to be that for a couple of hours on a weekend. Like you might wake up on a Monday morning and be like, you know what? I'm going to wear that lipstick today because I'm going to wear lime green lipstick to my job. Like, why can't I be that person a little bit more? So I do think that the fostering and safe space of fantasy, especially in entertainment, can be a powerful thing to sort of expand people's comfort levels outside of it.
Dude,
so,
of course. I mean,
core.
I think I talk about this all the time, but for me, what I connected with so strongly with performance in general when I was a kid was, I didn't know it at the time, but looking back, it's pretty obvious to me that I was like, oh, I feel more myself when I'm doing this. And and that's the kind of thing that, I mean, we started off, at the very beginning, I was talking about how I'm like kind of scared to dye my hair. And it's like the same, it's exactly the same where it's like, well, maybe if I did dye my hair, I would actually feel more comfortable or like, be like, oh, actually, this is more me than the me I was being for the last 30 years. And anyone can do that, I guess is my point. And the larger point is like, if we can get there through a silly fantasy world, that's great. That's what's wrong with that?
That's kind of the idea of Flux Pavilion, really. That it is wild and it is crazy and it is fun. Like, I think a lot of EDM does take itself pretty seriously.
Which is so dubstep, weird.
Dubstep takes itself more seriously in 2023 than it did in 2012, that's for sure. And more power to all of the artists who are serious about their art. That's a totally fine thing. But for me, when I'm looking at, where do I fit in here and what's my lane? It's kind of just like, I don't know. The words serious and fun and silly is a difficult thing to go around because it's like we said earlier, you can be serious, but it's also about not taking yourself so seriously. Like we're not ending world hunger. I didn't write bass cannon and save people's lives kind of thing.
I bet there's one. I bet there's at least one.
I mean, potentially. But it's kind of like removing the ego from it a little bit and removing the concept that like, oh, we're special because we're on the stage. And looking at it more as a holistic thing of being like, well, I'm on a stage because I've got, I've spent years and years cultivating all of these skills to be able to create a space that people can have fun in. So like, that's the thing that I've done, but it's not about me. It's about us. If I'm not having fun, the crowd can't have fun. And if the crowd ain't having fun, then I shouldn't be having fun, because that fucking sucks.
Yeah.
But it's like, rather than looking at so much of just like, the serious ego, this is my art, this is my work, come and watch me. Like, it's always find for me cultivating a space where it's just like, I'm creating a place for people to have fun in. And that is what I find the most fun. And I'm now getting back more into dance floor stuff, focusing on that quite a lot, because that to me is the rave. The rave is, the DJ plays a part in the rave, but the rave is it's the whole thing. It's the lights, it's the smoke, it's the people, it's the noise, it's the sound system, it's the DJ, it's the bouncers, it's the entire experience, which can be a whole fantasy if you're not in the rave. Like that's the thing I think that me personally is Flux, I'm trying to rebuild a little bit into dubstep, because it's like, it's become less about the rave, more about the spectacle, which I fucking love. I love a good spectacle, but I'm just like, that's not how I connect with the music. And what's better, the only thing better than a rave is a rave in a sci-fi futuristic space curated by a wizard. I'm like, I can't imagine anything better than that.
Cool. Fucking A. I mean,
that's what we're doing.
And also, not to like get too up my own ass about this, but it's like the being silly about being serious, or being serious about being silly, that's what life is. That's what humanity is. That's what existence is like, being a human and going through your life is the most brutal, horrific, joyous, incredible, hilarious experience. You know, it's all of the things. And so music, or a feeling that reflects that, to me, it just makes sense. Like, being alive and being a human is a crazy experience. I don't know. I just, I became an uncle last week, and I like watched this kid get born, and it was this, which I had never experienced before. You know, it's like that whole experience. It was like all of those things. There were hilarious moments, you know, it's all of them. And I feel like, I don't know, maybe I'm reaching too lofty here, but I feel like that's what we're talking about. It's like, no, being silly and being serious, it's the same thing. That's like what life is.
The experience of life. Yeah, like you said, when you heard Where You're At, you laughed. And like, that is how me and all my friends and all of us at Circus, that's how we responded to the biggest tunes. We'd laugh, not because it's a joke, but because it just elicits that reaction, because it's fun. And like, laughing, like, we tend to have these like stock ideas of feelings: anger, sadness, happiness, and I don't know, there's probably a fourth to make the elements thing work.
Right.
But it's like, there's so many different shades of all the different feelings, and like, laughing isn't necessarily because you find something funny. I know this like, it's a visceral reaction to something, and hearing dubstep and laughing, to me, is such an important part of it. Like, for me, I think one of the best things that's happened to dubstep in a long time is DJ Diesel.
Oh, man, yeah.
Purely because it's not funny. I'm not like laughing because it's Shaq, because the set's wicked. The vibe that he's creating is wicked. Everyone's really into it. So it's great. And I think that's what I find like humorous, or that's what makes me laugh, because it gives me this sense of abandon that makes me feel giddy, because it's like you've unplugged all of the rules, all of the things that we've always known, and broken the rules, and the universe has gone, okay, what if Shaq was a dubstep DJ? And it's fucking happened. And I'm like, this is amazing, because then I was looking around being like, what the fuck is going on? This is that is what I want dubstep to be. And I think that's where we talk about the seriousness, when you get the people like, oh, oh, he's a basketball player, shouldn't be a DJ. And it's just like, you're missing the point, because I want to see more shit like that. As long as we all understand that the music must be good, that's a given.
Of course.
So it's like we move away from that and be like, right, how can we make this just like so ridiculous and fantastic that we're all just having a great
to
time.
Shaq's credit, he was a DJ before he was an NBA player. I mean, he's been doing it forever. And so, it's certainly he's paid his dues, I guess. Like that would be the other knock.
He's got a great taste. He's got a really good taste in dubstep, and he gets it in a way that like maybe 50% of other artists in dubstep don't really get it. And it's that kind of I think I haven't spoken to him about any of it yet, but he seems pretty self-aware. And I think that's a strong thing. I think like I get the impression that he gets what's so wild and fantastic about what he does, and he leans into that wholeheartedly and gives is not just kind of like playing around with it, being like, oh yeah, look, isn't this funny? He's like, nah, man, let's fucking go for it. And I just think that is like the only way that it could have worked, and he's just absolutely nailed it, I think.
Dude, and you can tell, I mean, to bring it back to this again, you can tell he's having so much fun, and he's very rich. He didn't need to do this, So it's like, clearly he's there because he loves it. And I feel like that really consider, an infectious thing. Like, you can tell how much fun he's having up there.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. That it's like, with Diesel, we can like effectively remove the business element from it, which he has done, and his whole brand is about propping up new talent and new artists and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, oh, what does it look like if someone just had completely free reign to just do the thing that they love? And it's like, we get to actually see that in Diesel and be like, yeah, you know what, it's pretty fucking cool. I like it.
Absolutely. He figured out the secret. We all should have just been NBA stars first.
It's like, would be helpful to not need money from it, but
that would be nice.
There's a certain I like, part of me does think that if I didn't need to make money, I'd be doing the exact same thing, is what I think. It's what I have to believe, because it's like, how can you possibly, why are you doing the thing that you're doing if you don't believe that? But it's like there is a kind of a hustle grind incentive there that creates a little bit of fire that I do appreciate. Of just sometimes I really love the idea of feeling like I'm on the back foot a little bit, or let's say for a show and I'm playing to a massive crowd or to an audience or a place that I've never played before, and there's the idea that like, oh, are they going to like it? I kind of like that there's the imperative to prove myself in many ways. It's like, I guess it's not necessarily financially, but it's like that fire of just being like, I need to get to work. I really like that too. I do. I think about it a bunch since COVID. A little bit of hustle's kind of come back into it, because there's a whole new generation of potential Flux Pavilion fans that are coming out to the raves now, and I'm like, I need to do the thing that I do and show as like, somewhere on Twitter there was a girl who posted a Lost Lands poster and circled every artist she'd never heard of, and one of them was Flux Pavilion. Oh wow. And she was like, oh, I love dubstep and we listened to it for like 5 years. Oh, I never heard of Flux Pavilion. I was like, oh, this is interesting. That like there's a new generation of dubstep fans that just don't know what I do or what I have done, and it would be too easy for me to be like, oh, do you even know who I am? Like, do you even know about Flux Pavilion? Like, that's bullshit. I'm like, okay, cool. Well, I need to keep going and keep expanding on what Flux Pavilion is, and capture these people's imaginations with my thing. And the fire of that is helping me create great music. Basically, there's something to that. There's something of having a bit of a plan, and something's maybe not going your way. Like, if everyone knew everything that I did and every single human adored it, I think it'd be kind of a difficult space to live in, because you're just like, there's something nice about proving yourself or winning people over, like believing in something so hard and being like, this is great, And then people will be like, oh, I'm not sure about it. And you're like, come to my show. And then you fucking nail it. And they go out and be like, you know what? That was great. There's a distinct pleasure in that. And that's kind of where the Fluxiverse and a lot of this new energy for me is coming from, where I'm just like, oh, I don't want to just rest on what I've done before, because there's always going to be new people and new worlds and new spaces and new technology. And yes, the buzz is to keep on exploring that for sure.
To kind of wrap this up, man, just because we've been talking about the UK versus US, the old versus the new, I wanted to ask you just two quick, well, it doesn't have to be quick, but you can make them quick if you want. Two quick memories. I wanted to know your first experience of you going raving, or at least an early experience that like left an impression on you. And also your first time coming over to the States to play a show, and just those two experiences.
So I didn't go to that many shows when I was growing up, especially not dance music. Dance music was always reserved for guys with nice shoes and nice shirts going to house clubs and going to Ibiza and stuff. Like, there was drum and bass, but drum and bass was always terrifying to me.
Wait, why?
I was just... because I was a nerdy white kid from the Midlands, and drum and bass was like heavy, like it felt really drug influenced, and just basically all the kids in my hometown who were scary, the drug dealer kids, and the ones who like you would try and hang out with, but you'd just be super intimidated by, they all listened to drum and bass. So I imagined if I went to a rave, it was going to be the hyped up version of that, of these scary drug kids who just like, who will rob me, maybe. Don't know. It's hard to explain exactly what that 15-year-old was thinking, but I was quite scared. I was quite scared of the world, and like drum and bass felt very scary. It still kind of does. There's something about the UK club kind of aesthetic, the rave aesthetic, it's not scary, but it's a little bit unsettling because you're kind of out of your element. And it's like the people that are in their element in a rave environment, I always found like quite intimidating, because I'm like, less so now, because now that's me, because I feel more at home in a rave than ever. But as a 15, 16-year-old, it was always like, oh my God, these people are so scary. Like how do they live their lives? Like what am I going to be in for? So I kind of didn't really engage with it until I went to university. Just I was about 19, just old enough to be drinking a lot. And I guess when you're drinking a lot, you care a fair amount less about that kind of stuff.
And I
went to Fabric to go see Casper and Rusko. And Rusko played with, he had I think it was a McDonald's. It came with like a McDonald's Happy Meal hat. It was like a bird, a cardboard bird hat.
Right.
And he played with his no shoes on, played in his socks so that he could slip around.
Which he still does to this day.
Which he still does to this day, yeah. But I saw that and was like, so I guess it's pretty interesting. So imagine, young me intimidated by UK bass music, thinking that I didn't fit in there because I wasn't like tough enough or violent enough, or just had this idea that it was for like I'm a very soft, fragile, sensitive little sausage. So I was like,
which is so, I mean, it's interesting just because we were talking about how the UK maybe embraces that spirit of abandon and fun a little more than the US at this point.
Well, so now I've since going to see Rusko, I was like, oh, holy shit. Like, it's not like that at all in dubstep. Dubstep is, for me, now I've grown up and I've understood that all of dance music was like that in the UK. I just was a scared little kid, basically. So I didn't really quantify, but my coming into rave music and understanding what rave music intrinsically was and what it represented was dubstep. And that was when it all clicked to me. I was like, oh, holy shit, this is really fun. And I thought it was just dubstep. So I was just like, this is it. This is the one. This is the one for me, basically.
Yeah.
And now I've tried to write other styles of like rave music, and I just can't do it other than dubstep. I guess I've never actually put two and two together, but yeah, it was the music where clubbing and dance music and it all just made sense. And seeing Rusko play it, basically, I was just like, this is so fun and outrageous. And the whole crowd was like going off. It was huge. So it wasn't like, again, like I say, like it wasn't like a joke. It was like, this is happening and everyone's really into this. But it's not that vision of dark, deep, dark and moody, everyone with their heads up. It's like some dodgy guy trying to sell you some pills. Like that's what I've thought raves were.
I mean, but this is what we were talking about, right? Is like he made a space for you to come into, and then all of a sudden it's this explosion, and now we're here, more or less. Like, and to take it back to that, like living in a fantasy world or being silly, it's like he did that for you, and then look at what happened.
And now I can do that for other people. Yeah,
100%. Yeah.
So as far as I'm concerned, pre-Rusko, dance music, especially bass music, was a scary, intimidating place where I didn't belong. And then I heard Rusko and was like, oh, if he can belong here, then so can I. And yeah, like I say, I've since learned so much more about rave culture. I'm like, oh no, that's the fucking point. It has been since like since the 90s. The point is of rave cultivating this kind of like free thinking space. But yeah, it was Rusko, Fabric, and dubstep that did that for me.
I love that. And for you, what about coming to the US for the first time? What was that
so
like?
We couldn't get a visa for the first little while, the first couple of years. So I spent a lot of played around Europe. It's like when I was 19, 20, 21, around that age, I was just exclusively playing in UK and Europe. Went to Australia a few times. And then we finally got our visa. But I had already put out like Gold Dust, Got to Know, Cracks, I Can't Stop, Bass Cannon. All of these tracks had happened. Before I even came for the first time. So we stepped into America already at the top of the game, really, in the dubstep space. My first tour, it was over the first, me and Dr. P did 2 tours kind of back to back. We had 3 weeks in the middle, but one of them was headlining Red Rocks. It was like my first ever show in Colorado. It was a Red Rocks headline show. Oh no, that was Atlanta. Anyway, very early on.
Yeah.
I had that experience, and like the headline Congress and just all these kind of like big shows.
I think I opened for you when you did Congress in Chicago.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting.
I have a memory of that.
I mean, that is one of the biggest losses for rave music in the States. I think Congress had like such a special vibe for sure.
It was unique. Yeah. There was some, there was some bad shit that happened there. Like it was not looking good for that place, but the actual venue and the events that happened there, man. I mean, I was living in Chicago at the time, so it's like, it's close to my heart, but man, that place, it was something else.
Yeah. So I came in to America having done none of the grind, no support slots, I didn't get the, oh my God, I'm finally playing Red Rocks. I didn't even know what it was. I just I got in a car and I was in my hotel, and then they're like, right, we're driving to the venue. And then I just got to the venue, walked into the backstage room. I was like, oh, this is interesting. There's like a mountain inside the backstage room, and then walked out and saw it for the first time. I saw Red Rocks for the first time in my headline show when I was 21.
That's so
funny. I was just like, oh, holy shit, what the fuck is this place? And now, again, in hindsight, I like look back at that kid, really, because you're still a kid at 21 for sure, and just be like, fuck, he had no idea what the hell was going on. Like, I don't wish that I was me now, because there was something fun about that.
Yeah.
But it's just like, I look back at some of those shows that I played and think I just had no idea about how big that was, which I guess as a 21, 22-year-old is probably good,
Yeah.
to just kind of stream through and not really feel any of that pressure. Like the pressure came later when I'd already done all the big things. And then now I had to keep doing the big things. That was kind of what was difficult for me in my mid-20s. It was like, I've already headlined Red Rocks and sold out Mission Ballroom and all that stuff. I can't go down. I must stay at this thing. And then that's kind of when the career became a bit harder. But
that's a tough one. Yeah.
To be jumping into dubstep, basically like dubstep blew up in the States. And I just, after that flurry of songs, I was one of the top guys. So I kind of got imported into the States as, he's one of the top guys in this new thing, as if Flux was an established, super hyper professional act. But it was just me and Doc P. Like, we were running Circus Records in our partner Simon's shed, and yeah, we had no idea what the hell was going on. Like, I'd never been on a long haul flight before or anything like that. So it's
really
just like,
not even that. Wow.
Yep. It was just, a completely green, no idea what was going on kind of thing. And it was a good time. It was hard. It was hard work to do what we did. We did like about 45 shows in that first tour, like constant. I see Hamdi doing it now. Yeah. Hamdi's like blowing up and he's like touring all over the place. And I'm trying to give him as many tips as I can to just be like how to not about playing or music or anything, but just how to exist in that space. Because having not done that and then doing it is, especially when you're quite young, is a pretty difficult thing.
It's a thing, man. Well, I'm glad you're doing it, and it's fun to think about you and Dr. P as young guys running around. And yeah, you got to do that dance video, man. That's I could already picture it.
Well, people now still come to me and like, oh man, like Audiotistic seemed to be one. There's like a festival in California. People are like, man, your 2011 Audiotistic set is like the best dubstep show I've ever seen. And I'm like, I was in such a haze. Like, I remember it, but like now, if I was to play Red Rocks, I'd spend a fair amount of time preparing and making new edits and getting my show together. And just like kind of do that for any show I play, really. Just like make sure it's good. But for those shows, I just turned up like it was a 100 capacity club in anywhere, just with my CD wallet. And I was like, all right, I got an hour, let's play some tunes. And there's something really beautiful about that. And then for people to come and be like, that was the best show you've ever played, when I'm overthinking my set, I'm like, I go back into that space and be like, you know what, I've done the best thing to this one person. I've done the best thing I've ever done with the least amount of preparation, because I was in it. I was just truly in it, and I was living and breathing it. So yeah, maintaining that kind of connection to the genre and to the music is a really important thing.
I mean, dude, I really love talking to you, man. I feel like we could talk about this shit for hours, but I want to let you go. Is there anything else on your mind? Anything else we should get out there before we go?
Only one thing I'm working on, which I'm really excited about, is an entire collaboration album, which I'm not going to tell you who it's with, but it's a whole album, and the whole thing is collaboration. Okay. And we're working on it and it's the thing that I'm most excited about. So
will it be known that it's you when it comes out? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's not a surprise. It won't be a surprise who it's a collaboration with, but it's a thing that hasn't happened that much. Okay. So it's going to be good. You could probably guess. But yeah, that's the only other thing that I'm just like, sweet, I can't wait. We've got singles, a bunch of singles coming out next year. And then I've got Fluxiverse Volume 2 that I'm working on, and just a variety of stuff. So it's kind of like, the continuation of the journey. Fluxiverse is like the first step in a good 2 or 3 years, I think, continuous stream of explorations in dancehall music. So yeah, just keep your eye on. I guess I'll talk to you next year.
Dude, let's do it, man. I really love you, man. It's always a pleasure to talk, and thanks for coming back and doing it, man. I had a blast. Yeah,
nice. Well, yeah, just when I've done enough that we've got new shit to talk about, let's do it again.
All right, dude. Well, have a good night. Thanks for doing this.
All right, nice one. Take it easy. See you in a bit.